Hello, everybody, including, I think, some first-time viewers today. It's me, Paul Woodadge. It's WW2 TV, and we've got a very special show coming for you today because we have a guest joining us live from Canada. We also have two cameras out on the site. It's our first actual live broadcast since, it must be early December because it's been miserable weather. But today we have two cameras out on sites, one at the Canadian Cemetery at Bény-sur-Mer in Normandy and one further inland at Bretteville-sur-Laize, just south of Caen. But before we show some footage from there, I must introduce our guest first. So joining us from Toronto, Ellin Bessner. How are you this morning for you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're very excited to do this. It's going to be really good. So just to show you where we are, it's not the best day in Normandy at the moment, but this is images from Bény-sur-Mer, where we're going to be starting after Ellen does her introduction in a few minutes' time. But that is the cemetery live in Normandy. You can see it's the sky is okay. It's worse inland at Bretteville where Colin is, and so our two roving reporters today are my other half Magali there at Bény-sur-Mer and my mate Colin, another Normandy tour guide, and as is Mag, who's down in Bretteville-sur-Laize, and we'll bring Colin in later on. And what we're going to do today is tour you around the cemeteries, visit a few notable people that Ellen's going to talk about, and Ellen is going to explain the background of the story we're talking about, and of course we're referencing her wonderful book Double Threat, that is just simply amazing. So, well, I'm going to hand over to Ellen now. Let's get started with basically, why is your book called Double Threat and what's the origins of it all? And I'll let you go, okay, because you're absolutely ready to go. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, but first of all, before I do, I want to say thank you so much to Paul and the crew and for making this happen. And it's all because of a tweet where you said, we need some women historians on. And I'm like, okay, what about me? So I actually sent it to you from my bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I've been very thrilled to do this because it's a story that people do not know about. And the fact that we are doing this today, Friday, January 27th, 29th is very significant because, and I'll explain about the double threat in a second. This is International Holocaust Education Week. And on Wednesday, they remembered it across the world. I don't know if you can see my slides. Can you?
We can.
So 2 days later, that's today, there's a link because when you think about the Second World War and you think about Jews, most people, okay, think about the 6 million victims of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, of the Nazi Holocaust, which they should. But what's not really thought about and what people don't realize is that there were 1.5 million Jewish liberators, Jewish soldiers, Jewish airmen, Jewish sailors who liberated, who were the victors in this war and who went to fight Hitler and defeat the Nazis and stop the Holocaust. And their stories are usually not known or even considered. As I say, they're hidden heroes. So, after D-Day, where we're going to talk about these graves and what happened, those 11 long months of fighting until the end of May 45, the Jewish comrades in arms with their non-Jewish compadres and bunkmates and squadron mates and, shipmates fought arm in arm. But for the Jews, it was a special mission, more meaningful in one way, because it was a double threat to them. Not only were they fighting for king and country, but they were also fighting for the survival of their very race itself. And if they were to be caught and their Jewish identities were to be discovered by the Nazis, their fate would be very dark indeed. And so this is why, and basically Prime Minister Mackenzie King was the one who started this. When Jews in Canada first decided that they were going to enlist, they could not have known. You know who that is, of course, Anne Frank. They could not have known the extent, the horrors that would have happened and befallen the Jewish people of Europe. But they did know that it was very dangerous for Jews in Europe. They had relatives. This is a picture a friend of mine's father took. He was in the RCAF when he liberated Bergen-Belsen. So they would discover these things. But when Canada declared war in September 1939, not September 1st, like you guys did, but September the 10th, why? Because as a robust discussion needed to happen in the House of Commons, as befitting, a wannabe independent dominion. Well, they were, but fledgling independent dominion. But there was never any doubt that Canada was going to go to war. In fact, they'd already quietly mobilized in August anyhow. And so what happened was when Canada declared war, it was the Jewish New Year in September of 1939. And if you know anybody who's Jewish, the Jewish New Year is a very important holiday. If you don't go to synagogue, then basically you're toast. You're going right to hell. So everyone goes. And so they heard the rabbi's speeches exhorting the Jewish community to serve. And so over these 3 days and 4 days of the holidays and before, lots of these scenes were playing out in Jewish homes in Canada and of course in the UK as well, where Jewish boys would come home for the families going to synagogue and services and lunch, and they'd be in uniform, or they would be going to uniform right after the holiday. And the rabbis, including this rabbi from Toronto, told the newspapers when he was speaking, his sermons got covered. Like nobody actually covers sermons usually, but his was covered in the Globe and Mail newspaper, saying that Britain's fight is the Jews' fight because our people will be decimated if you don't go. But there was another reason. It wasn't just a fight over there. This is a book that the Canadian Library and Archives bought a couple of years ago, which was a personal book of Hitler's. And it was in his collection. And there were a lot of Nazis and fascist sympathizers in Canada in the 30s. So this book told Hitler not only the list of names of all the communities, large communities, cities in Canada. That's the column on the left. The middle column is how many, or like the regular population of those cities. And then in the middle, you see Juden, where the Jews were living. So Hitler knew every single city where the Jews were. And he was going to do what he was going to do in Europe. And then, we were next. So that was a known fear, which is why it convinced Canadians of Jewish faith, including famous people, hockey stars like Mo Hurwitz, Sergeant Mo Hurwitz, MM and DCM, to give up his career with the Boston Bruins, which is one of the most, famous hockey teams in the National Hockey League in Canada, and turn down a tryout. And for a Jew to have a tryout in the hockey NHL was a big deal. And he said, how could I fight when millions of my brothers are being killed? So he joined the Tank Corps and became the most highly decorated non-commissioned Jewish officer in Canada. And he didn't make it. He's died. He's buried in Bergen-op-Zoom. Now, Prime Minister Mackenzie King is the one who actually coined the phrase of my book. And if you know what the word chutzpah means, chutzpah is basically when you kill your parents and then you go to the judge and you beg for mercy because you're an orphan. Like I was reading this book, his files when I was researching, and he didn't help the Jews before the war. In fact, as I'll show you in a minute, Canada was a very anti-Semitic country, and he was at the heart of it. Yet after the war, he wrote a letter to the Jewish community, thanking them after the murder of 6 million Jews and 17,000 Canadians of Jewish faith served, 450 didn't come back. Then he thanked them saying, oh, for you, this war was a double threat, as I explained. So I got to call my book that because it's such a double entendre. It's such chutzpah. How could you thank us after before you wouldn't let us in? You didn't care about the 6 million who were killed. And now you thank us. Anyhow, that's my little thing. So I was just going to tell you a little bit about what Canada was like when the war broke out for Jewish people. And I have to say also for people of color and for Asians. I mean, it was a very discriminatory country. This is a sign not too far from where I live, 1938. Hotels were off limits. You couldn't rent to Jews. There were quotas in universities that kept Jewish people out of medical school. There were no jobs in certain companies. There were no boards of directors of the stock exchange. Any Jews were not in there. There were Christie Pitts riots, which is a big thing in Canadian history, where swastika bearing kids came onto a baseball field in Toronto, and basically 10,000 people had a riot, Jews and Italians against the fascists, and like nothing was done. There was nobody charged. So this is what Canada was like. There were restrictive covenants. Last thing I'm going to mention is the MS St. Louis, which is a very famous blot in history. You know this story, where Canada, Cuba, and the United States turned away this boat full of 900 Jewish German refugees before Hitler's invasion. And only 200 were murdered in the Holocaust. The rest went into hiding and survived somehow. Canada finally apologized. But the whole thing about Canada, you have to know, when these boys wanted to enlist, and women later on, was that for Canada, even one Jew was too many to have. And so Canada didn't accept any refugees between 1933 until the end of the war, except for 5,000, which is Dominican Republic. Tiny little country, lots of Canadians go there on vacation, not now, of course. They took 10,000 people who were Jewish. Canada took 5,000. It's a crime, and we all know that. So this is what would happen when a fellow named Benny Yellen from Montreal went down to enlist in the RCAF in the 101 Squadron, which, if anyone knows, it's the one that had the most casualties in World War II because it carried this ABC cigar frequency jamming radar that if you had a German-speaking operator, so lots of Jews were taken to this squadron because they could speak Yiddish, and they would jam the frequencies. So they had two antennas, so the Luftwaffe looked for these planes. Anyway, he went down. He said he wants to be a navigator. Look, he says why he's going. This is his motivation, because he's interested due to race persecution of my people. So this is what the flight lieutenant Laws, who was the interviewer, writes about him. Confident, but not showing any of the usual super salesmanship of the Jew. I've seen so many, like, you would be fired if you did that today. Human rights law would not even allow this anti-Semitism, but this is the kind of garbage that Jewish people who wanted to enlist had to face. And I've read a lot of files. This is one of the more horrible ones. Anyway, he got in. So this is why Canada's Jewish community set up its own recruiting offices for Jewish people by Jewish officers from World War I. And this is the one in Montreal, because they knew which regiments were taking, which regiments weren't taking, and started practice and interviewing so they could get accepted as opposed to being turned away, which is what happened in many regiments were not taking Jews, which is crazy. You would think that, a family like the Seven Sons of Ottawa's Mazer family, there was a rabbi in Ottawa. He had 9 kids, 7 of them were in uniform. There was a huge interest in going, of course, because this was their war, if anyone's war. But you would think Mackenzie King would be very happy to have Jewish eager fighters, but you would be wrong. And this is what happened. So despite all this, one of these pictures you'll see on the left, very, very left, the trio in Manchester, that's my father-in-law. They were up to no good that weekend on leave, I have to tell you. If you read my book, you'll read about what they did. But yeah, they served and they overcame these obstacles both at home, in the military, and on the battlefield, and they overcame them with great courage. And in fact, they didn't hide their religion. I said they were hidden heroes. That is true, as you'll see soon when we get to the graves, but others did not. And they were very proud to show Hitler that they were Jewish, coming back to strike a blow. And in many cases, that was true. A lot were European Jews who had moved to Canada or escaped just in the nick of time and went back in. Even without Canadian or British citizenship, they went back to fight and save their people, as he did, Gordon Steinberg. Last slide before we get to the graves and get to the cemeteries. This is the numbers that were collected because the Jewish community, pardon me, the Jewish community kept its own nominal role during the war, because the government was saying that Jews weren't fighting. So they kept statistics, and the rabbis and all the service clubs and synagogues would know who was going, and they would send it into the Canadian Jewish community headquarters in Montreal. So they would say, yes, we are. And so here's the breakdown. What do you notice, Paul, about the Navy? Like hardly any in the Navy, because the Navy was very, very British, very, very colonial. They didn't want anyone in the wardroom who wasn't Protestant and white and a British subject. And the Air Force took 2.5% were Jews, which is, above the 1.5% of Canadians in Canadian population. There were 16,000 Canadians in plus who served. I have since found another 2,000 did not put their religion down, and another 90 plus were in the Merchant Marine. And I'll give a shout out to Martin Sugarman from the Ajax group in London, England, ex-service personnel archivist. He's done a book on the Jews in the Merchant Marine, because they weren't even recognized as veterans until many years after the war. So we're closer to 18,000 Canadians of Jewish faith served out of a population of 160,000 Jews in Canada at the time. So that's like 10%. But if you take out all the babies and the grannies, it's 40% of the Jewish population served, which is exactly the same ratio as non-Jews who served in Canada. 1.1 million served out of 11 million. So we did serve with great courage and distinction, and overcame not only the challenges of getting in, but then facing the Nazis. 200 received bravery medals and gallantry medals. And then I'm going to stop, and I'm ready to go, because now we get to D-Day. And this is when the Canadians of Jewish faith served arm in arm with their non-Jewish comrades, but came face to face with the truth about what has happened to the Jews of Europe. As soon as they landed, they had that double mission. Back to you.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just responding to a message. No, this is fantastic stuff. So, well, let's start in the cemeteries then. Let's get to Mag.
So, can you see who we're going to see first? Should I get rid of my slides? Okay.
I've got with that. So, all
right,
we're going to put on Mag's footage. So this is Mag. Mag is at Bény-sur-Mer Cemetery in Normandy. This is just a couple of miles inland from Juno Beach. And Mag and Colin, who's at Bretteville, what we're going to be doing is alternating between one grave in Bény-sur-Mer, then a second grave in Bretteville-sur-Laize, then back to Bény again, essentially to give Mag and Colin time to get to each grave while Ellin is talking about them. So we're at our first grave. We should be at our first grave now. And this is Joseph Goethals. So I will hand over to Ellin to explain what we're going to be doing. And during the show, I should point out to you, viewers, that we're going to be placing stones on top of the graves. And as a white guy, non-Jewish from England, I'm going to ask Ellin to explain what it is, what the tradition is, and why we're doing it. And just so you know, we collected these stones, Mag, myself, and Colin, last week on Juno Beach. So they came from... where did we get them? I forgot which bit we're at now. Were you at, yes, Bény-sur-Mer. So right in the middle of the landings there, we picked up some stones. And so Ellin, what is the tradition in honor of?
Well, there's a couple of interpretations. It's not a law to put pebbles, but it is a custom dating back to the Bible when before tombstones were a thing, people put rocks to make a cairn. So it was permanent. Another interpretation is that to keep the soul to earth a little longer so that their memory is stays with us and with the mourners a little longer. A third is that if you look at some of these cemetery tombstones, I'm not sure what you can see here. Let me see if you can get up close. They're supposed in the Star of David, there are letters in Hebrew, and they have a it starts, well, you won't know what they say, but in the Star of David, there it is. Yeah. So those letters, those backwards Hebrew writing letters, they mean, may their soul be bound up in the, may their soul be bound up in the everlasting life, something, so what those letters mean is that, we want them to know that by placing the stone, we have been there. And the pebble in Hebrew, another name for it is tzror, which also means bond. So we want to show the deceased we've been there and that their memory continues to live on through us. And so many people take special care in picking these stones from like their favorite beach or the person's favorite, cottage or something. It means a lot. When my father passed, we had special stones from his stone collection that he used to have. And every time I go, I put another one on. So this is Joseph Goethals. And I don't know if his sister Ruthie is on. She's in Chicago. But Ruthie, here's your brother, Joseph Mordechai Shabbatai Goethals. He was born in Poland, came to Canada with his family in 1920. They lived in Montreal on Arcade Street in a very Jewish area. And he went to a high school called Baron Byng, which is very famous. Leonard Cohen went there. He went to night school after he graduated. And in order to earn the money, he worked as a sewing machine operator for a furrier. They earned like 99 cents a day. But he was very studious. He was very philosophical. He collected books. Ruthie told me that he had 2,000 books, which is insane how much. His father was a World War I veteran, and Joe was also a very ardent supporter of having a homeland in Israel for the Jewish people. So when Britain first declared war, Joe was totally against the British because they were blockading the Holy Land for Jewish refugees under the British mandate. But by 1943, of course, he saw what was going on and he went to enlist. Now, Joe had a small medical problem on his neck. He had a cyst that leaked fluid, but it wasn't a big deal. Like, it wasn't going to stop him from joining. But his father was so adamant that he didn't go, that his father wrote to the military, sent them behind Joe's back his military, his medical records, saying that, no, my son has this dangerous problem and he tried to get him out because he was wounded 3 times in the World War I. And so, but Joe was furious. He tried to join the paratroopers, but being 6 foot and 200 pounds, they told him he would kill himself if he jumped out of a plane like that. So he went into the artillery. Now, when I wanted to see if I can show you just his attestation paper for 1 second, if I could, Paul, because it's really, really telling of why he went. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and then we'll go right back to Joe. So Joe, being very cognizant of what was happening, he told the interviewers why he wanted to go. First of all, he put down Hebrew. That's his attestation paper, which is very risky to do because it goes on your dog tag and it goes on your pay book that you got to carry with you. So being caught with this is like certain death from when you got to Normandy. So, and that was a risky but a courageous thing to do. But the second thing is, this is what he says. I don't know if you can read it. Can you see it? You want to read it out for us? He was merely anxious for 5th line.
I haven't got my glasses on. I don't have my glasses on.
All right. So. He was merely anxious to get into the front line and settle a score, which he felt that he, as a Jew, should be allowed to settle. He didn't want to stay in Canada for any length of time in training, and he didn't like there. You see, it says that they didn't want him as a paratrooper. So they put him as a gunner. Anyway, so he got to Europe. He fell in love while they were training with a young, beautiful refugee from Austria whose parents had sent her out of Austria on the Kinder transport, which was a very famous rescue operation. She never saw her parents again. And she joined the ATS, I think it's called, right? Where she was, so she was in uniform, playing piano, classical music near his base where he was stationed in Guildford. Is that how you say it? In Surrey.
Guildford, yep.
In a canteen. And so he went over and he watched her play and they fell in love. And they got engaged, and she was 21 when he asked her to marry her. And then fast forward to June 6th, and they were all in quarantine, and he broke up with her. And I want to show you, if I can, for a minute, the letter that he sent to her, because he said, you know, my life is not my own, and I still love you, of course, but, you know, we're in a very strange time. So here's the letter he sent, a Dear John letter. That's Hetty right there, his girlfriend. I don't know if you can see that. And here is the letter. Darling, this time words fail me. I'm now most definitely no longer master of my fate. I think it'll be wise on your part to completely forget about me. Time will heal the wounds. On my part, my feelings towards you are unchanged, still with love, Joe. So that's Hetty after the war, which I'll explain. And that's Hetty when she turned 92 in Kentucky. How did Hetty get to Kentucky? That's a whole other story. You have to read the book. But basically, he didn't come home. And she married a monuments men guy, if you know about that. Mm-hmm. So Joe was killed here. It looks here. Joe was killed close up 8th of July, 1944. And he was with the North Nova Scotia Highlanders. You guys know the pictures of the landing craft with the bicycles? Okay, that was Joe. So he was killed a month later near Caen, I assume.
Yeah, it's going to be the tackle Caen, yeah.
Because he ended up changing from artillery right before he got onto the landing craft. He wanted to get closer to Hitler so he could kill Hitler and set up a Jewish homeland. And he and Hetty would move there. So he went even closer to the action. Anyway, when the war ended and Hetty went back to civilian life. She married an ex-American soldier. They moved to the States. She kept all Joe's letters. She kept all his photos, and she named one of her grandchildren after him. So that is a love story that had never died. And at the bottom, you'll see in Hebrew, it just says his name in Hebrew, Yosef Mordechai Shabtai, the son of Israel and Miriam Gertel. He fell near France, and then the date in the Hebrew calendar is at the bottom.
Well, this is just amazing stuff, and I'm so glad we're doing this show. So, well, that was fantastic. That was our first grave. We've got a lot more to do, folks. So don't run out of tissues too yet. We've got a lot to go. So we're going to cut to Colin now.
I'm already going.
Colin is at Bretteville-sur-Laize. So he's about 25 miles away from Mag. You can see how different, just interestingly, how different color the stone looks there. It's the same stone. It's just the way the weather comes in and the aging there. Colin's having problems with his stabilizer, the crane for the camera, which is mine, by the way. So he's holding it in his hand and it's freezing there. So there we are. So this is our next grave we're stopping at.
Decorated hero.
Abraham Arbor, and I will again hand over to Ellin to explain the story. This is, by the way, you can see it's a different stone. This is what the replaced ones. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission go around yearly and they measure the depth of the engraving. And when a grave gets to a certain worn down status, it goes into the list to be replaced. So this is a new set granite stone. So that's why it looks slightly different to the other one in Bény-sur-Mer. But there we are. I'll hand over to Ellin now to give the story. So Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders. And I'll hand over.
All right, I'm going to share my screen just for a second. They are, just so you can see his face, if you don't mind. I'll show you who he was for 1 second, and then we'll come back to the beautiful cemetery. So again, this is Abe Arbor. They called him Mo. He was from Narcisse, which is near Winnipeg, in the western part of Canada, Narcisse, Manitoba. So I want to show this map, because it's important. Courcelles-sur-Mer is where they landed, but he had already survived Dieppe. He had already survived D-Day, and he won a military cross in between, where he ended up at Saint-Germain-la-Campagne, where he was killed. And this is the stone that the locals in Saint-Germain, Campagne put up to that unit. So I'm going to stop sharing now and just show you again the beautiful cemetery stone about our friend Mo. So he was too angry at Hitler and what his gangsters were doing to the Jewish people. And this is a quote I'm reading to you from the regimental newsletter called the Oatmeal Rag from the Camerons. His gangsters were doing to the Jewish people to stay in a safe, cushy job, because he was in the transport division of the Camerons for at the beginning. Then he transferred to a rifle unit in order to get closer to the Germans. So why did he win the military cross? Because in August 7th and 8th, 1944, during Operation Totalize, he led B Company. He had to step in. He was a company sergeant major, but he had to step in after their commanding officer was wounded in the liberation of Fontenay-le-Marmillon. Hope I said that right, south of Caen. And this is what, and it could be a movie. It should be a movie. You should make one. Quote, his daring charge began with Arbor standing in the center of the road, feet spread wide apart, pistol in hand, pirate style, shouting, "If any of you are Camerons, fighting men, follow me." And that's what happened. It was a very unusual step to award a non-officer with the military cross. In fact, he was one of the first warrant officers to ever get it. Then he never got the award because 2 weeks later he took a direct hit by a tank shell while liberating Saint-Germain-en-Campagne. And he had a wife, a British war bride named Clarice, and a daughter named Wendy. Anyway, she did remarry and move to the States. And she picked up his award from the king the following year. So that's our story of one of the 200 Canadians who won a military honor from the king.
And David O'Keefe is watching the broadcasts, and David, of course, wrote about Operation Spring and the Black Watch, so he's the one to ask about a movie. But and Colin has placed his first stone there, so we should move back to Mag now. This is what we're going to do now, folks, alternating between the two camera people, and bearing in mind, I'm sitting in a nice warm office, Ellin is sitting in a nice warm office, Mag and Colin are out. It's a bit windy, it's a bit blowy, so they're the ones who are doing the hard work. We're just talking. So this is Mag now at the grave of Kramer, Fort Garry Horse. So, of course, that's the armoured unit that came ashore on D-Day and fought through the Battle of Normandy. So, again, I'm going to hand over to Ellin to tell the backstory.
It would be great if we could see the epitaph a little bit to the bottom, because I can't read it yet, if she can go down. There you go. May your soul rest in peace, forever remembered by your mother and family. Very important, and I'll tell you why that is so touching. Let me show you the picture, thanks, Meg, of who he was, so you'll get to see what this fellow looked like. A little guy. That's me, by the way, at Abe Arbor's grave 2 years ago. All right, this is Trooper David Kramer. He was a very small young man. He was from Winnipeg. He was the youngest child. There were 5 older sisters and his widowed mother. His father died when he was 11. He was a good boy. Okay, he was working at a glove factory. He was 5'3.5", 113 pounds, and green eyes. Anyway, when the war broke out, he was 20. He enlisted, I'll go back to the grave if you like. He enlisted as a driver mechanic on tanks and then a gunner with the Fort Gallery Horse Regiment. And when he went overseas in 1941, he got into a whole bunch of, we call it Soros in Jewish. He had so many problems, the poor kid. He got German measles right away, or rubella, when he was in England. Then he fell off a tank, so he was in hospital again because his knee got infected when he was training. Then I have to say, he got the clap while visiting a prostitute. I'm sure it was his first time because most soldiers, you know, they did, as you know, and drink was involved. Anyway, when his tank regiment landed in Normandy, they hauled Fireflies, and they also had duplex drive Shermans tanks, the ones that could swim, quote unquote, off the beach. And they were supporting the infantry regiments. I don't know exactly how or where he was killed, but I know he was in July 6, 1944. He was supporting the battle for the Carpiquet airport outside of Caen when this happened, when he was killed.
Yeah, it would be just west of Caen somewhere in that Caen Carpiquet area, 6th of July. Yeah.
Well, that's where they were. That's where his cavalry.
For those watching, we did 2 shows back last year on Operation Charnwood. So if you watch, go back and find Operation Charnwood 1 and Operation Charnwood 2. We'll have the story. We don't actually talk about the Fort Garry Horse, but we talk about the general advance on Caen. So particularly you new viewers, and welcome to the channel. There's plenty more videos you can go back and watch after you've seen this one.
Look, the sun's out. It's going to be a beautiful day.
Yeah, it's lovely now.
Somebody's shining on us. All right, I'm ready to go to our next guy.
Yeah, just to respect your in the book are talking about the fact these guys went to prostitutes, because it's one of those things that no one likes talking about, and you know, the fact is they did. Some of them, not all of them, but some did. And
anyway, it was an epidemic. The Canadian Army lost so much sleep and getting there. I've seen the medical records, military, the Canadian military RCAMC reports. They had to spend a lot of time, never mind wear masks and, you know, stand 6 feet. They had to tell these guys, you know, they're all in the hospital with the clap. They're not fighting, they're sick. So stop it. They gave them condoms, they gave them education. It happened, right? All right, well, where are we now?
Guys away from home. So we're back with Colin again in Bretteville-sur-Laize. So this is another story that is a very, very important one in your book, and a very important one generally. So this is Mooney Ehrlich. So again, I'll hand over to you. I feel like I'm just doing nothing in this show. I'm just controlling the cameras. It's an easy one for me. All the pressure's on you today.
Well, you know, why don't you tell us why it's important that this is an unlooked at part of the Second World War stories, and then I'll go into Mooney. Go ahead. Why you think it's important that we talk about his political affiliation?
Well, Colin, who's filming, would admit he's actually got communist leanings, hasn't he, Colin? Haven't you, Colin? I mean, I'll touch that to him later on. But the fact is, it's something. Being in France, and Mag is French like me, you know, we don't talk enough about the communist resistance. We don't talk about the efforts of those who had left-leaning politics in defeating Hitler. And there was a lot of people with that idealism, and whether we agree with it or don't agree with it, it was a significant part of the war effort. And the communist involvement has been rather pushed out of the way in Canada, Britain, and America. I think you'll kind of agree with that, won't you, Ellen, I guess?
I did a whole chapter on it,
and it's important. It's important to honor these people. So there he is, another. Can
you see
tanker.
His face on my
Yep.
Okay, so we can. He was Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. When he was killed, but he wasn't trained as infantry. He was trained with the tankers in Dundurn, Saskatchewan. But I think they transferred him like 10 days before he died. So here's the thing. He was very controversial and gorgeous. Apparently all the ladies loved him. He was born in 1905, so he was old. And he came to Canada and he started working as a Communist Party organizer and a journalist. Then in the early 30s, during the Depression, he led a very famous Canadian revolution. Well, it fizzled, but it was called the March on Ottawa. We had work camps in Canada for the unemployed men. They got, like, I think 20 cents a day or something for their work, shoveling, whatever, making roads, cutting trees. And the men were really upset about their living conditions. So he led them to get on trains, these hobos and homeless men, and go on to the capital to protest. But of course, the government put the kibosh to that, and they were a lot of arrested. But the Mounties, the RCMP, were looking for him. They had reports on him that he went by the name of Jack Taylor. And they said he was a curly-haired man who wore a brogue. is that a brogue? Is that like a suit or something? I don't know. And spoke with an accent. And the ladies found him irresistible. Literally, this is what it said. In 1937, surprise, surprise, no surprise, he went over to the Spanish Civil War and went with the Canadian. And I have a little, you can put this in the chat, or there is a link for you guys who are watching about the Mackenzie Paps, which is a brigade of Canadians who were internationals who went to fight on the government side in the Spanish Civil War. He was there with them. And then, of course, when the Second World War broke out, Mooney was communist government in Canada, interned them all because they were against the war. They were on Russia's side first, right? There were no trials. Hundreds of them were locked up. And eventually, our friend Mooney and others who I'm going to show you about in a minute signed up. So Mooney went overseas, and it was late in the war already. He went overseas in April 44. He landed on D-Day +7, July 13th. And that's where he was attached to the Storm SDG Highlanders. He was already 38 years old. And I want to show you that just before he died, and I've seen this letter, so I know. I'm going to share my screen with you. And he was also married, by the way, even though he had lots of girlfriends. But then he got it annulled during the war. So Mooney hung out with all the other communists who were in service. Unfortunately, this next fellow, you won't see him. He doesn't have a grave. I think he's on the Bayeux Memorial. There's no grave. But his real name was Moishe Kozawatsky. A lot of Jewish boys kept their names, but some did not. But he had already changed his name to be like Dick Steele for Stalin, like communism, before the war. It was very, very close friends. They had a big hug on the field. Dick was a tank driver. So they were all killed within the same few days of each other. So Dick was killed in a tank, the battle for Trun, Trun. In the Falaise offensive. Mooney died around the same time, and so did another communist, Reuben Gorditsky, with the Black Watch, who's in David's book. And they all died literally within days of each other. So Dick was killed August 17th, Mooney was killed August 20th, and Reuben was killed on the same day. By the way, his grave had a cross on it originally until the family found out, and he survived the Very Ridge offensive, only to die a few weeks later while he was cleaning his gun. There's a whole controversy about this, which you'll read my book about, whether he did it on purpose or he was killed accidentally.
Well, let's move to Mag. Well, thank you, Colin, for doing that. We'll move back to Mag again. This is how it's going to go. So Mag is back. And this is a particularly moving one today because we have members of Meltz's family watching. They're on YouTube there. So I hope you appreciate what we're doing for you today. It's a combined effort from Canada and France, and Colin's Irish and I'm English. We're all coming together to do this for you. So that's pretty cool, really. So Bombardier George Meltz. Again, I'll hand over to you to speak then, Ellen.
Okay, you wanted to ask me maybe how this whole thing started. And we're here at the grave, and I'm showing a picture, if you don't mind showing my slides, where this whole research started. So this is me in Normandy at George Meltz's grave. Well, before I found it, I was much younger. I had blonde hair. I was, work with me, right? Much better looking. And we were there with my family. And we did what you did. We walked around like as your crew is doing. And we looked for the Jewish graves as well as the non-Jewish graves. And when we saw George's grave, I'll let you see it. That is George Meltz. And that is George Meltz's war bride, Trudy Lewis from Britain, England. She was 18 when they married, 19 when she was a widow. That's George. And he came from a huge family of 10 kids, 3 sets of twins. He was the baby. A lot of others were serving as well, but he was the only one to go overseas. I want to tell you that I'm going to stop sharing now. When George was killed, you want to go down a little bit and show what the epitaph is. It is, I know you saw it, and it leapt out of the grave at you.
Yeah, it just did. I don't know why. I've been looking at visiting war graves since I was a teenager. So, you read many, many epitaphs. So that one leapt out at us, and I don't know why particularly. It just did. Deeply mourned by his wife and family. He died so dreary. Shall suffer no more. It just couldn't tell you why. It just leapt out. We all noticed it, and
many people who've seen it have been in touch. But for me, I needed to know who this person was, because when you go to these graves, There's nothing in the graveyard that tells you anything, really. There's that little book in the, alcove there with the green, when I was there, had like a green duotang plastic cover. Like there's literally nothing, and that should be changed. The CW, Commonwealth War Graves Commission should have QR codes or something on the graves. But this particular grave, so I came home and I Googled who he was. And the most amazing thing happened. And if you read my book intro, you'll see. First of all, my cousin Judy Gutman, whose father the book is dedicated to, said, Meltz, my very best friend, one of my best friends is Isabel Meltz. Let me ask her if this is related. And sure enough, it was her uncle. And then I Googled again, and there was a guy in my area who lived 3 blocks from me, whose name was George Meltz, who was named after him, who was president of my synagogue. So I was having goosebumps over goosebumps. And that's what started me writing about it, because who wrote this epitaph? It turns out it was Trudy. So she was a war bride. She had a marriage for 7 months. He died July 8th, same day as Joe Girdle. The family thinks maybe he was having a smoke and a German sniper got him. Others say that he stepped on a mine. We don't know. But it was a cry of grief, but also pride, and explains why these Jewish boys went. This was the whole raison d'etre of my book and of them. And this is what George sacrificed for. So the Jewish people, he didn't make it, but the rest of them did. And that's why we're doing this on the week of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We did go to his grave. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen 1 second, because we can't really all be together. But I do want to know if I can, tell me if this works. That's me at his grave 2 years ago with my friends on Ted Barris's tour.
And Ted's watching as well.
Normandy. I mean, in the summertime, we must have had 50 people put stones on his grave, and it was very moving. I know that his family has not been able to go, of course, because of COVID and other reasons. But we did say Kaddish for him. We did say the Jewish memorial prayer. It was extremely moving. I think Ted filmed this. Could I try and see if it works?
Yeah, let's see if it works.
Fast. If it doesn't, we want to put it. So look what we did for George. Yeah, it's not going to work.
So beautiful. They're going to be so happy.
That's me crying. Okay, we're going to move ahead because it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's unfortunately with internet bandwidth. Nice idea.
Anyway, but we did it, and we're saying a prayer for you as well, George. The whole world now knows who you are.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's like yourself. You go to these cemeteries and they're just stones. But I always say to my clients as a battlefield guide, they're not stones. They're representing people, and you have to visualize people, not stones. And this is what we're doing today. Is we're putting identity to people. I've walked through this cemetery many times. Mag is a tour guide. Colin's a tour guide. We've all walked past these graves countless times, and now you've got that backstory. But well, there we are. Thank you very much for your service, George. We're going to have to move on to Colin now, otherwise we're going to be here all day. And I'm loving what we're doing.
I could talk about him all day. Thank you, family.
So Colin is now back at Bretteville. It's amazing for the folks how different the light is. Isn't it incredible how different the it is in the two locations? So there's Colin, and this is Fabish. So Lance Sergeant Fabish, Royal Canadian Artillery again, 25th of July. So that's bang on 28th of July.
Yeah.
That's Operation Spring, or just after again, isn't it? So
So he was 40 years old, nearly 40 years old. He came from a small town. I'm going to show you who he is for quick, because I have some amazing pictures to show you. A small town. His family was from the old country, from Romania. Okay. They came over as Jewish settlers. Who do you see in this picture that you recognize right away?
Oh, yes.
The Queen and the King with Jack Fabish and another guy manning the artillery. He was with the 18th Field Battery, 2nd Canadian Anti-Tank Regiment. He lived in this small town, and it was a farming town. They were the only Jewish family there. And he said he enlisted on September 11th, 1939, because he was surrounded by a bunch of Nazis, which there was true. That was a very big sympathizer. Even the RCMP were watching those towns. Very, very small farming town. They have very famous family members. I don't know if you know, some of them may be watching. I went to this grave with my friend Gail Quinter and her husband Alf, who is a relative. Also, Liz Clayman, who is an anchor for Fox Business News, the Countdown, Clayman Countdown. That's her last summer, or last year, I think, with her family visiting. And I was talking to her yesterday. You should know that in Canada, many of these boys have landmarks named after them. So he has Fabish Bay north of where he lives. Okay, so he could have gone home because he had a bad back from lifting shells. and his family was poor. The farm was failing. A lot of the other boys were already in service. And he died because he stepped on a mine in an area that was already cleared, because he chose to stay. He could have invalided out. Anyway, it's just an honor to see what he did. And, he was a lance sergeant, right?
Yeah, and we'll place the stone again. And I think it's also very important, folks, to get across that whether we like it or not, a lot of people who died in the war didn't die running over the hill, knocking out the enemy machine guns. Some just died because, as I always say, I'm sorry for the rude word, shit happens. It's a war situation. People step on mines. There are accidents. There's friendly fire. There's just things that happen, and it's somehow reassuring to know that they are dying in a very, very many different ways, and we're honoring those who aren't. They are not just the guys who were up the beaches on D-Day and died in that first wave. They're dying throughout the war in Europe, and they're dying in all the engagements, whether they're big or small, and people are dying every single day, and spending time to just honor these people, I think, is very important. So I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying, perhaps not the right word, but finding this profoundly moving, this show. So it's incredible stuff. So that's Fabish. I think we'll move on again. Otherwise,
we'll go back to Bény, to Dr. Mandel.
So back to Bény, and it should be at our next grave, which is Mandel. So captain this time.
Captain, yeah, he was a medical officer with the 4th Div. So he knew Dick Steele, because how do I know this? He was with 4th Div, and he was with the 21st Armored, which was the Governor General's foot guards. And how do I know this? Is Dick Steele borrowed his typewriter to type letters home to his wife. The connections of these Jewish people that are from Canada is incredible. They all, were in touch with each other. And when you find these out, you realize how the world is so small, and it's all fate. And they did also seek each other out for, news from home. So Jacob Mandel, again, a Saskatchewan soldier, just like Fabish, came from Estevan, which is just on the border with the United States. He was a medical doctor. He won the silver medal at university when he graduated. He was married. He enlisted in 1941. Before he went overseas, he was in charge of a couple of hospitals in Halifax and in New Glasgow on the East Coast, and he shipped out himself. It's heart-wrenching story of why he's here and not someone else is that he and another medical officer named Elliot Corday, Dr. Elliot Corday, were both in the wrong place at the wrong time. So he was killed August the 14th, 1944. Severe high explosive wound to the chest. I should show you what he looks like and show you his medical card just for a second. So that's what he looked like. And that's his medical card. He was with the 12th Field Ambulance. He also has an island named after him, a little bit closer to civilization than Fabish did. Oops, sorry, I'm going to get out. And what happened was this. They were taking turns going out with the Jeep to the ambulance, whatever, the lorry, whatever you call it, the ambulance to attend to wounded men. And it wasn't his turn to go that day. It was Dr. Corday's turn. They were both from Canada, both doctors working together. But for whatever reason, Mandel took his shift for his friend and he got killed, and Corday didn't. Fast forward to the end of the war, 20 years later, General Omar Bradley and his cardiac surgeon, Dr. Elliot Corday, come to D-Day for a ceremony. Corday disappears for a couple of hours, comes back, and General Bradley said, "Where'd you go?" And he said, "I went to see my friend." And he told the general what happened. And for every single year, for many, many years, Omar Bradley would have a wreath, which is not a Jewish thing, put at Dr. Mandel's grave. Because of his sacrifice, the surgeon was able to save Bradley's life, and he never wanted to forget that. And so the children of like the nieces and nephews became friendly. The parents became friendly with the Bradleys in their Palm Spring, California home. And it's an crazy story how just for fate and because he volunteered to take his friendship, he's there. Bradley lived and Corday lived. Corday's name was originally Cohen. So it gives me goosebumps.
David O'Keefe suggests it's probably friendly fire, this one, which is one of those things again. Yeah. Incredible stuff. Well, thanks again for that story. We'll go back to Colin now. This, I think, is arguably
Another
the most
doctor.
interesting grave. I mean, interesting. They're all interesting, but this is interesting because we're
Who are you?
Friedman now.
Jules. Oh, you're missing. Okay, I'm in the wrong order. I'll go. No problem. I can found it.
And the obvious
Jules Friedman. Yeah.
The obvious difference here, folks, for those watching, is that there is a cross on that grave, not a Star of David. Which opens up a whole, rabbit hole of other stuff we can talk about. But, the point is, you said it earlier, Ellen, some Jews, and this applies to Canadian, British Army, American Army, are serving with their faith and their name, and others are concealing it and hiding it. And this is a slightly different story. So what do we think?
This is an amazing, I'm so grateful to you. We have a group of historians across North America, and there's a link in the YouTube channel of one of the most recent successes that we'd had, changing the Star of David, putting one on a grave that had a cross for 75 years. You should read it, guys. It's about Morley Ornstein, and I have to thank all the historians who worked on this. So this is a new one for us. Basically, what I read is that he was from Toronto. He was an optometrist. He went to Harvard Collegiate, which is like the 85% Jewish high school in Toronto. He was an officer. He was attached to the 6th Armored Regiment Hussars, tanks, right? He qualified as a driver of wheeled vehicles and tanks. Then, for some reason, he was in a hospital for a long time. Then he was attached to RAF Linton, I don't know why, in April 44. And then he embarked for France July 17th with the Hussars. He was involved, as far as I know, with Operation, a mad charge across the Laison River in Operation Tractable. And the tanks all got bogged down. On his attestation papers, it says Hebrew. His parents are Hebrew. Everything says Hebrew, so there's no reason why. But two things could have happened. They could have never reached the family after the war, and the paperwork default always went to a cross. That's what I was told by my war graves experts. Or he somehow changed his, he scratched it out on his, he threw away his dog tags. I haven't seen his whole file. We are going to find out, and we have to find it, and we have to find why. And if his next of kin are cool with it, we will try to have this changed. So you've given us a new challenge live here on your show. No,
it's amazing stuff, isn't it? And the backstories are just incredible. You can't help thinking, what does that lead to? And again, these rabbit holes of investigation that people like yourself, we live because we love telling these stories, but you can't live long enough to tell all the stories. You get caught in this paradoxical quest to find out more and more and more, knowing you're never going to find it all out. But thank you, Colin, for what you're doing there. I'm glad the sun is out for you there, my friend. It's good. So, well, we'll move back onto Mag again now. So back to Bény-sur-Mer, and Mag should have moved to Brownstone, which is...
yes, and I know this is a beautiful... Look at the day. You guys are so lucky. It ended up being warm and sunny, or warmish and sunny.
Colin, who's Irish and ever so slightly grumpy, and we love him to bits, has been grumbling about the fact the forecast has said rain all afternoon for days before this. But in the end, it's been okay. So there we are. It's
Excuse me, Paul, but the indication we had on the paper is not the right one.
Okay, Yuda's fine. I can do Yuda. It's fine.
Where are you then, Mag?
Okay, it's the 13th. Sherry just find out. So
okay, so did I put the number round?
Who are you? I can do the next one.
Well, I just put. I must have put the grave marker, the plot number down wrong. So
no problem. Who do you have?
So it's Brownstone. We're going to, yeah.
So go to Colin.
We'll go to Colin then. So Colin, where are you at? Colin should be at. Hang on, I'll just mute you, Mag. Hang on.
Are you at Moran's? Dr. Moran's?
Where are you, Colin? I can't see where you are. I can't see which grave you're at, Colin.
I am at Captain Moran's.
Moran's, yeah,
that's fine. I'm ready. Yes. Now, Dr. Captain Moran's. I thought it would be good because we have two doctors together, right?
Yeah.
We had Dr. Mandel and we have Dr. Moran's. Now, Dr. Moran's came from Winnipeg, and he had a wife and kids, and he went to medical school in Canada, of course. I'll go back on my slides and show you just a second about him. It's he was the coroner. I'm going to share my screen. He was the coroner. Whoops, hang on a second. He was the coroner in Flin Flon, Manitoba. I don't know if you know where that is. So Flin Flon is like a northern mining town. And there's hardly any Jews living there. So for whatever reason, he went up there to be the coroner. He was very involved in the community. He was on the Elks and the Rotary, which are like men's service clubs. So really in a very prominent local personality. He enlisted, he went overseas, and he was attached to a regimental aid post. And he was killed at a place that you might know better than me, August the 14th, Claire-Tizon.
Oh, yeah.
And how he died was that his regimental aid post lorry was destroyed by an 88 fire. So that's a Moaning Mini, I assume.
No, it's artillery.
Yeah. And all the personnel kit and effects were burned. But in his, and I don't have a picture of him, but if anyone does, send it in his effects, personal effects, he had, besides all his officer stuff, he had a stethoscope, he had a book on local anesthesia, and he had a souvenir German pipe and belt that he had gotten, plus all his Sam Brown stuff and everything. So, just two doctors, similar age, older than most people, putting themselves in harm's way so that he could patch up, the boys who were coming back and not coming back themselves. And so it's just a very good story to show two doctors lying in the ground instead of coming home and taking care of people after the war, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for doing that, Colin. Again, we've done the Stones, so Max should now be back at...
this is a very interesting one. I don't have a picture of him, but I do want to tell you that this man was murdered by the 12th SS Hitlerjugend Kurt Meyer as part of the 150 Canadian POWs who were killed in a book that's called, well, not in a book, near Abbé d'Ardennes and some of the other shrines. I'm sure you take your battle tours too. He was 31 years old. He had a troubled life. His father and remarried. They moved to Philadelphia. They had two more kids with their new wife. They didn't get along. So Irvin Pavel, whose real name was Israel Pavalov, joined in Canada the Regina Rifles, the Johns, up the Johns. He was 29 when he enlisted in 1940. He didn't speak to his father for 10 years. And then he joined up. And I think he'd been raised in Saskatchewan, as a matter of fact, too. There is something to do that. The reason I'm including him is that even though he was in Philadelphia when the war broke out, I'm sure he's Canadian at some point. And he wouldn't write his father. So his father wrote a letter to this is what his father's address in broken English. He sent a red and white striped V-gram addressed to Department of National Defense, Ottawa, Canada. And it ended up getting to him. Okay. And he said, I haven't got any answers from my son. Kindly get in touch with my son, and see to it he should write a letter to me, his father. I'm sick with a heart ailment. I am appealing to you, gentlemen, again, to see my son, that he should write to me, his father. This is exactly what he wrote. I could just hear this Yiddish-speaking man say that. I mean, he might have been a bastard. We don't know. But anyway, Irvin never wrote him back and said no. And he came ashore at June 6th, 8 o'clock in the morning. They were going to capture the village of Bretteville-sur-Laize. And it happened on June 9th. The Johns suffered heavy casualties. They did hold the village, but then he was wounded manning a Bren gun, and a German person shot him in the head, and his body was left there, and it was found a few days later by the Canadians when they finally advanced. Now, the man, Kurt Meyer, you probably all know this story, the SS officer, he was taken to Canada for 5 years, convicted for war crimes. He spent 5 years in jail, and then Canada said, bye-bye, go back to Germany, have a nice life. Nothing was done to him. And it's another crime that...
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for folks watching, go back through our videos. We did a show back about the Regina Rifles defending Bretteville-sur-Laize with Mike Bechtold. That was back in June last year. So again, scroll back through our previous output and you'll find an explanation about that battle there. So again, and interesting, again, this one where the two names there, the name, he was Israel was his real name, and he changed his name to less Irvin
Pavel.
And protecting himself a bit. Didn't work, unfortunately. And now we're back at Colin now, and this is a brief one this time. This is just Horn this time. This is one of the ones we can't forgive us, folks. We cannot go to every single
Yeah,
grave.
we've got
We
a
do
couple
half an
more,
hour
and
on
then we're going to
everybody.
say our prayer.
I wish
and
we
then we'll
could.
end off. Yeah,
But
no,
you know,
I feel so bad. There's 20 of them in each cemetery at least, and
we
the
had to
list
be
I gave
selective over
you
which ones
is
we
on
went
the
to,
YouTube
and you know,
channel.
we could do a part 2 at some point, and we could come back and do the other ones.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so this is Horn, another gunner, another artillery.
Yeah, but
again,
he's actually
August.
a dentist. He's a dentist.
Oh, so yeah,
He's actually
yeah.
a dentist, and he didn't want to be a dentist, so he switched into fighting, point the end of the stick, and that's how we ended up here.
And that's a will be a brief one. So again, Colin will do the stone. Again, these stones, folks, are from Juno Beach, collected by our fair hands last week. And then came back and we washed them in the sink. We washed them in the bathroom sink for you. So we did it all properly. So thank you very much. Can we go back to Mag again now? And we will just keep on doing
We've
this.
got
and,
2 more, I think, to go.
beautiful
and then
how
we'll
the
save our
weather is
prayer,
now.
yeah?
I think Maggie should be at Harris now, I think, if everything's going okay. Yeah, there we are.
So Freddie Harris, this is a very famous Torontonian. And if anyone has been to Juno Beach Center, you will have seen exhibit about him. I want to share my screen just to show you Guts Harris, what he looks like. Guts Harris was from Toronto. His father was a World War I veteran. He was a famous doctor. Now, you see him when he landed on Juno Beach, June the 6th. He didn't land. He didn't make it. But he had his hair shaved like Mr. T. So he just had like that mohawk thing because he was really tough. He was a sergeant. And I'm going to stop sharing so you can see the grave. Freddie was the first guy when the landing craft doors went open. And he was shot right away, 8:15 off the beach, Queen's Own rifles. And he died right on the landing craft. But the amazing thing about him is that I heard today from the, I think, niece of Cyril Crane. Cyril Crane was a British war veteran. She actually emailed me and said that they were buddies. And Cyril wrote a poem about him called My Buddy, and it's become very famous. And the thing about Freddie was a Jew. Freddie went to a synagogue in Toronto. His father was very prominent, parents very prominent in the Jewish community. When he was killed, his parents got back a box, of course, with all his stuff in it. And I want to show you what was in the stuff in the box because his mother was freaking out. She wouldn't even sign the receipt. There's Freddie in London with Canada's National Minister of National Defence at one time, who also was a veteran, lost an eye, Barney Danson. This is what was in the box that he was wearing around his neck, which is a cross. So his mother was like, wait, why does my Jewish son have a cross on his neck? He's not Jewish. What happened? And we wondered whether it was to protect him or if he got captured, then the Germans would think he was not Jewish. He had also crossed out the word Hebrew on his paybook and put C of E, Church of England.
Yeah.
So,
It's these stories that you'll never know you hope you'll find out the reason for these stories, but it's just, yeah, amazing stuff. And I can't thank you thank you enough for doing all this. And I hope those watching this are enjoying this or finding it moving. So there's Sergeant Harris there. So thank you very much for that, and we'll go to Colin again. So you know the score, folks. So back to Colin now. So we are now at our next one, which is Albert Twyman. Hope I've said that right.
You have. Albert was from a very large family, and he was a twin. And I need to show you, his twin is alive. He's 101 years old. He is named Jack. They were both. Oops, hold on. There's Albert Twyman. He was with the Essex Scottish. Albert's brother, Jack, that's his brother. They both signed up. They were both called up. They didn't volunteer. They were, quote, zombies. And there's Jack today, 101 years old. And what happened was that Albert's best friend, Mac Latner, went active and went overseas. So Albert said, I'm going to get active too. And he went overseas. Mac came home. He didn't. Before he left, he asked his sister in a letter, if it isn't too much trouble, could you send me a wurst, which is kosher salami, and a cake, which we don't know if he ever got because by the time he, who knows if that stuff ever got there. But he was killed and his friend came home. And when we went there 2 summers ago, I didn't have a wurst, but we did put a baguette and some fruit on his grave just to say, hey, we know you wanted some goodies, so here they go. And I know his family misses him terribly. And so we're honored to see you today.
Just to confirm, so Jack the twin, he served as well, yes?
He did. He was an anti-aircraft. No, he was artillery in Eastern Canada. They were both in Eastern Canada. Anti-aircraft guns in the Strait of Canso, which is between Cape Breton near Sydney.
Mm-hmm. We had a couple of people watching saying, are we going to honor some of the men who made it back home? And kind of indirectly, yes. But because we thought we'd get the cameras to cemeteries, we are going to focus in this show on those who have fallen. But I'm telling you what, folks, I'm enjoying what Ellen's doing so much. We're definitely having back for a part 2 and maybe a part 3 and a 4, because I feel there's a lot more mileage we can take out of this. So we just thought because we're going to get locked down in France again soon for another month, I think. So we thought before we get locked down, probably Monday, it would be silly not to use this opportunity to go to the cemeteries and show you what, because there was a thing last year with COVID. People say, well, people aren't going to France. People don't care. Are they going to the cemeteries? People are still going to the cemeteries. They are still paying their respects. The gardeners are still tending the graves. They're still cutting the grass and clearing the weeds. And it's just nice to go and visit them in the winter, I think, sometimes. And, when there aren't the tourists around. So we're loving what we're doing here. So thank you for that one, Colin. We'll move back to Mag again now. And
we're almost done
just
too.
It's beautiful where the sun is out there. I'm glad that Mag isn't standing in the freezing. Mag's brother Terry is with her. Terry was a French commando and a French Foreign Legionnaire about 20 years ago. So another guy who served his country. He's also in the tour guide industry. So we're all out of work essentially because of COVID. But this is fantastic. Well, we're back at Brownstone now. We're gone there. So here we are.
And is he our last one? Because if so, I'll get the prayer out for people to.
I think we might. I think we're doing Mike Litak, aren't we? Next,
we're not. We're
not doing it. Okay, so we'll finish with this. Well, we've got Colin's last one to go as well.
Okay.
Are we going to do Gorditsky, or did we?
I talked about him, and we could visit him.
We might as well go to there as well then. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Yuta Brownstone, and I'll show you who he is. I think his sister is his niece is watching from Winnipeg. So Ellin Brownstone. It's actually quite a strange story, but I don't have a picture of him up here. Okay, I'm sorry. So Yuta was the younger brother of a family that both boys served. Ben was my friend Ellen's father, and Yuta was the younger brother. Ben was married. He had a business in the fur business. Yuta dropped out of high school, was lost a little bit from what his relatives tell me. Worked, he was earning $30 a week. And you do have him. Excellent.
I just found
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, I did have it. I don't know what happened. And they were 4 years apart. They came from a broken home because the parents divorced, which was unusual. And some people told me that Yuta enlisted because he really didn't have any prospects. What he did when he enlisted is he told the recruiters all his brother's achievements, that he was a swimmer, that he was champion this, that he was a trumpet player, but that was all Ben. It wasn't him. Anyhow, I also think he experienced anti-Semitism because in his personal effects, there was a picture of a beautiful girl from Debert, Nova Scotia, or Sydney, or somewhere in there. And basically, she wouldn't give him her real address. She told him on the back, find me care of the cafe, the Victory Cafe, where I'm serving you, because she wasn't Jewish, he was. And there was that thing in those days, the prejudice, right? But he kept her picture all through Europe. I've always wanted to find her. I've never been able to do so. Anyway, he was killed in the Battle of Carpi Cay, July 4th, near the airport with the Royal Winnipeg Rifles. And again, the nice story is that Benny, who was in the RCAF, was able to visit the geography that the government named after, see a plaque of this landmark, geographical landmark that the government named after him, and was very proud of this plaque that he was able to place there. You have to get there by float plane. Like, it's really far north in Manitoba. But all his life, Benny was, super attached to the memory of his brother.
Wow. Well, we're going to just go to Colin's last grave, then we'll do some general views of cemetery with Mag, and we'll finish off with a prayer and a finale, really. So this is our final grave we're going to go to now, which you mentioned earlier. This is Reuben Gorditsky, so another one of the communists. So Colin is particularly thrilled to go here.
Yes, and he's also a Black Watch. So David, you wrote about him a little bit in your book. I mean, it's a sad story, and I have met the family. The wife was actually more sort of gung-ho and communist than he was. He was the leader of a ladies' garment factory union in Montreal. There was a big sweatshop industry in Montreal, mostly immigrant Jews in that area of St. Urban Street, sort of Mordechai Richler, Dodi Kravitz, Leonard Cohen, that area, Irving Layton. And he had relatives in Eastern Europe, and he was afraid, like they didn't hear from them. You know, they got deported, and they did lose family members in the Holocaust. So he enlisted so he could protect his wife, Rita, as well as his own family and niece and nephew and his mother back in Montreal. That's why he went. We don't know why that gun went off August the 4th. I think it was August 7th, 20th. I can't remember what it says. Sorry, it's hard to see. We don't know why the gun went off.
20th,
Yeah. Whether it was a mistake, because he should have known how to clean his gun. He was a bloody Black Watch sniper, was he not? Like, obviously he would know what he was doing. If he survived Verrier Ridge, he would have known. But one of the kids, his wife remarried, and she had 2 daughters, and they never knew about Reuben until after she died. And they opened her, side drawer, and they found all his letters and diaries, and they're like, she had another husband? What? She had, they didn't know. So I hooked them up with the niece and nephew and they had a reunion in Toronto, and it was so emotional. And they were trying to piece together why this man was dead. And one of them said that they think the wife wrote him a Dear John letter. We don't know, but it's a very sad ending to a very amazing man.
And David O'Keefe just confirms that he was killed cleaning his Sten gun, but witnesses heard it, but no one saw it. So there is, I say, that element of mystery. Yeah.
So we remember you, and your family in Toronto and Ottawa remembers you, and Montreal, and in the States. Arnold, Gloria, they all remember you.
I can't tell you how I'm moving this. So that was the end of our visiting of individual graves. What we're going to do now is kind of cut between some general views. I think I'll put it on Mag's view because the sun is so beautiful there at Bény-sur-Mer. And by the way, folks, these are referred to as the Canadian cemeteries. They are still, of course, Commonwealth war graves cemeteries, and there are a few Canadians in some of the other cemeteries that have mostly British burials, and these cemeteries also have the odd Brit and the odd other nationality as well. The two cemeteries sort of divide the two halves, if you like, of the Normandy campaign. So you find in the one where Mag is, Bény-sur-Mer, lots of June dates, lots of D-Day, lots of the next few days. And then, of course, Bretteville-sur-Laize, being that much further south of Caen, is mostly July and August dates. It's not quite as neat. There are some odd dates at month, but that's how it kind of divides. And one of the things that's interesting is I was always told the reason those locations were chosen is that nearly all the men buried at the first cemetery were killed within sight of where you're standing. It's on a kind of a hill, not a hill, but like a ridge. And the second cemetery, again, nearly all the men buried there, kind of within sight of it. Broadly speaking, the guys killed in the Falaise Gap were a bit further away, but those two locations represent the kind of the hubs, if you like, of the two major Canadian involvements in Normandy. So anyway, I'm going to hand over to Ellin now for the finale of this, and I'm going to just let Ellin do her stuff now, and I'm privileged to be a part of this.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite everyone who's watching to join me in reciting Psalm 23. Which is King David's psalm that is usually part of the Sabbath service, which you're about to have it before we are over here in Canada, and also at funerals, where it's David. That's the famous one with the Valley of Death, and I have, if you permit me, to recite it in English as well as Hebrew, and we can all do it together. The link is on the YouTube chat if those of you would like to recite it. I'm going to stand. I don't know if you can see me. All right. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Ro'i Lo Echshar, Binot Desha Yarbitseni, Al Mei Menucha Yinchaleni, Nafshi Yishovev, Yancheni Gemag Leg Tzedek Lama'an Shemo. Gam ki elech begait el mavet lo ira ra, ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorab, dishanta v'shemen rashi koshi ravaya, ach tov v'chesed, yurdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti v'veit Adonai lo orech yamim. Amen.
Well, thank you very much for that, Ellen. And I've done 170 of these shows since last June, and I'm this is one of the most moving ones I've done. I can't tell you how much I've been privileged to be part of this, and it's just wonderful seeing these images. And remember, folks, we're just doing this with phones via Zoom meetings, which are meant to have business meetings with your boss and, you know, meetings with your parents, teachers, and stuff like that. We're doing this extraordinary stuff with it, where we're using it for things it's really not supposed to. We're limited by internet technology. We're limited by the fact they're standing out there in the cold, and yet somehow, despite the fact it's not a completely slick professional production, it comes across, I think, what we're doing with sincerity. And I know people watching it have been very moved by what we're doing. So extraordinary stuff. I can't say again how much I've found this intensely moving doing it. And for those family members watching it, it's our privilege to have you join us. And perhaps you'll stick with us and look at some other things we've been doing. And we've got quite a lot of Canadian content because we've got lots of Canadian historians who are now buddies of the shows: Ted Barris, David O'Keefe, Mike Bechtel, Brad Sanqua. The list goes on of Canadians who enjoy participating in what we're doing here. Some lovely shots there. There's Mag there at the in the middle of the cemetery there. It's just beautiful. So I will bring this to an end in a minute. Just remind you, folks, this is the first of two shows we've got today. We've got another one in a couple 2 3/4 hours time about Canadian logistics, more about the supplies and how the army and the forces were supplied in Normandy, with Arthur joining us again from Canada, telling about the logistics and all that. Then on Sunday, we've got Tim Cook joining us. So you must know Tim's work. He wrote that incredibly brilliant book, Fighting for Canada's History, all about how Canada has written about it again, talked about the monuments, the cemeteries, the museums, the memorials, and all the flag, the whole saga of the years since the war was over. That will be a brilliant show. I'm looking forward to that. We do love our Canadian content on World War II TV. There's something about it that's particularly interesting for us tour guides. Even though I'm a Brit and my great uncle was in Charnwood as a British soldier, we all have this affection for the Canadian troops as well. I'd like both Mag and Colin, if they don't mind, to do a reverse here and put it on a selfie so we can say thank you to you. There's Mag. Well, that was quick then. There's Mag and Terry, her brother.
Thank you. Merci.
And Colin, yeah, there we are. Hello, Colin. It's been great. Thanks very much, Colin, and I hope you're not too cold. I owe you a whiskey. Mag, I owe you a cuddle later on. So there we are. Or I can stop it. I can give Mag a whiskey and Colin a cuddle. I'm easy. It's easy on that. So there we are. Thank you very much, folks. It's really good. Don't forget the link to how to order Ellen's book is in the description below. All the links that Ellen mentioned are in the description below. So use that. There's a great resource there. Check us out. Subscribe to our channel. Look at what we're doing on Patreon. Mag, do you want to say anything? It looks like you want to say something.
No, that was extremely moving, as you said, and we go so often to those cemeteries, but you know that behind each grave there's, of course, a family, and it's more powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Mag. Well, there we are then, folks. This is Paul Woodadge and Ellin Bessner and Colin and Mag. I will see you all again this afternoon for our second show. So, yeah, unbelievably good stuff. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to say check out all the links below. And I'm definitely having Ellen on again because I do not feel we've got anywhere near tapping the stuff she has in her head there. So we'll settle that for some time later in the year. So again, thanks for watching. I'll see you all again soon on World War II TV. And again, welcome to our new viewers. I hope you stick with us. Thanks for watching. See you again. Bye-bye.